record on computer, and I will go live on Facebook. Sorry, hang on, it was sending it to the wrong page. I want to make sure I'm on the right page. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Sheila Gallant-Halloran, as you know, with Vision Travel. I run my own independent affiliation called Lush Life Travel under Vision's banner. Today, I'm thrilled to have my partners Dom Martinson and Ali Jacobson from Natural Habitat join us. This is probably the 22nd, 23rd iteration of me doing these Tuesday travel days, Zoom calls. And it's all about if you could only do one more trip. None of us are traveling very much these days. So it's all about if you're not traveling this year and you're saving the money and the time, let's think about the big trips you want to do going forward. And if you could only do one trip, what would that trip be? So I am going to turn it over to my partners, Dom Martinson and Ali Jacobson. They are, as I mentioned at the beginning, they're both in Boulder, Colorado. They'll do a presentation and share some itineraries with us, give us a background about Natural Habitat, who they are. I know Don and Ali from Virtuoso Travel Week. We have been working together for several years, and it's my honor to turn it over to them. Don, welcome away. Go take it over, and I'll just hit share the screen.
Well, thank you so much, Sheila. This is a pleasure, and we have largely a North American travel. We cater more to North America than anyone else, and a growing partnership with Canadian travelers, largely through Vision Travel, from Vancouver to the Maritimes, and it's just a pleasure to work with Sheila, whom I've known for probably 13 years, and Sheila is one of the biggest proponents of adventure travel and specialty nature travel, which is what obviously Natural Habitat does. And my colleague and good friend Ali has been my partner for a long time. And I tend to do the overview of Natural Habitat. Ali gets down into the nitty gritty of like what goes on a daily basis. So we work in tandem very well in expressing what Natural Habitat does through Sheila. So this is a three-pronged approach to who we're all about. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and share a screen and dive right into a little bit of a PowerPoint, if you don't mind. Bear with me and make sure that I'm here. And so hopefully you are looking at a beautiful leopard. I'm sorry, a cheetah in Africa. Does everyone see that? Give me a thumbs up. Perfect. So first and foremost, our mission statement is conservation through exploration, protecting our planet by inspiring travelers, supporting local communities, and boldly influencing the entire travel industry. We have been a leader in sustainable travel for really from the beginning. I just want to say that Natural Habitat is less of a travel company that is sustainable and more of a conservation organization that uses travel to promote and protect wildlife and local communities. That's what we've always been. So it's in our DNA. We're not a company that is just shifted to conservation because of who we are and what we do. It's actually very ingrained in our DNA. we are a global company, and here is the world of what natural habitat does, from Galapagos to Borneo, from Greenland to Antarctica, and everything in between. We represent all 7 continents, and so we look forward to getting back to all 7 continents. But if you see what we have in North America, and particularly the provinces of Canada, from British Columbia to Quebec, and we've got British Columbia, we've got Manitoba, we've got Alberta, and Quebec, and then also all of the national parks of the United States and Mexico. So I think that this is probably going to be really important as we come out of COVID, and we are we're a post-COVID accelerator. I love that word. I learned it from a friend this past week. A post-COVID accelerator in terms of traveler. And in terms of travelers, it's not just post-COVID, let's get back on the train. We're accelerating through what we offer, first and foremost in North America, but throughout the world. Our partnership with World Wildlife Fund is more than just a symbiotic relationship, which it started out as a means to them bringing us travelers and us bringing them members. It's become such a substantive partnership where our guide Renzo here, wonderful Renzo, who guides trips in the Pantanal of Brazil, can go on a daily basis and look at the increase of jaguars in the Pantanal and all things about what's positive, and bring it real time with his connection to World Wildlife Fund, and make the experience super exceedingly wonderful with our guests. So again, our leaders are not just armed with their experience and their education and their ability to anticipate the needs of our guests, but they have that added benefit of continued education with the World Wildlife Fund. Second, think about small groups. Our average group size across the board is 12. And how amazing is it that we have, and this is just on scheduled groups where we only have 12 people. So in Yellowstone, we would have 7 people in a van, and this is not a great picture, but it does show a little bit of social distancing, and it shows our ability to actually get out of the van and separate ourselves and be part of this amazing experience in Yellowstone or wherever we go. One of my favorite pictures is a photo safari that we do in Tanzania, where we have 2 vehicles with only 6 people. That means that everybody not only gets their own window seat, but they get a whole row. And if you look at this picture, you see 3 people in a van, and this is not unusual. 3 people in a safari vehicle, and a second vehicle which is taking pictures of this vehicle. And Allie's better than I am at counting lions in a tree, but these are tree climbing lions in central Serengeti, where you actually have 8 lions in a tree and 3 people in a vehicle. So our objective is always to focus on animal count, not thread count. Thread count is great and luxury is wonderful, but our luxury is the amount of what you see when you're in the wilds. So this could not be more of an appropriate picture of where you actually see more animals in a tree than there are people in a car. And then lastly, focusing on secluded accommodations. So we always go for, and going back to, we're more focused on animal count and what counts more than thread count. This is our base camp in Greenland, where you would access this camp by way of a fixed wing flight from Reykjavik, Iceland, and then a helicopter or a boat up to Eastern Greenland base camp, which is totally sustainable, zero, we're leaving no trace behind. So it's set up in July and it's taken down in September. And all of these tented camps are forward facing, looking across the Sermelik Fjord and viewing the ice cap of Greenland. Completely sustainable with solar power and a chemical toilet and two little cots and a couple of little Adirondack chairs sitting there, where you are literally looking at one of the most spectacular places in the world. I thought I had never, and I think Ali would attest that Botswana is one of the most special places in the world. But when you go to Base Camp Greenland and you are in awe of azure blue water and ice chunks floating down the Sermelik Fjord, the size of a picnic table to the size of a large building, and everything in between, you really feel lost in a scenery of, wow, I am really small. I'm really completely nothing in this universe than a speck. And that's what I came back with, Base Camp Greenland. So new this year is what we've done is because, as I mentioned, the majority of our product is based on small group scheduled trips, on average 12 people. But during COVID, we realized the importance of make it private and getting people away, getting clients away from other travelers. So let's say that this is a family, just as an example, a family from Alberta that they want to join a natural habitat trip, but they're not really keen to join other people. So in Yellowstone, and I'm using Yellowstone as an example, but we do it globally. This multi-generational family, grandparents, kids, and grandkids, they want to go to Yellowstone and they don't want to be intermixed with other people. So we would actually segment them out, and we would take one of our two vehicles, our Sprinter vans here, and we would give them their own van and their own guide. And we would then put, like I said, a guide on that trip. And they are not doing a custom trip because that's not in our wheelhouse. They're taking a trip that we've already created that is vetted and perfect, and it has all the aspects of what you want to see in Yellowstone. And they would be in their van by themselves. So what we've done is we've made it private, and this is all on our website, and Sheila can help you as your advisor. If there are only 3 of them, well, look at the price. It goes up significantly. But because in this case there are 6 to 7, they're actually paying the same price, $61.95, as if they joined the trip as part of a group. And they will have their own experience, and then add to that, children under 17 have a discount. So you really have this wonderful opportunity to make it private. And what Natural Habitat has lacked for a long time is making custom trips. So we do custom trips throughout Africa and through Latin America and other destinations, but we now have the wherewithal to create a private experience based on this trip. And I think that Sheila and Ali and I can help you all make that happen through this Make It Private. And then I'm going to end with this and let Ali kind of chip in and talk about other aspects of what we're doing in terms of addressing COVID and addressing where we are now in this new norm, which I hate, but it is a new norm. Our it's our brand promise, but I actually think that when we get our evaluations from travelers that have gone with us to different places, and Allie has some wonderful stories about this experience. Grizzly bears in on the Katmai coast of Alaska, is that people come away and they say we felt our most alive. They were disconnected. They were completely immersed in nature. They had their feet on the ground, and they basically come away saying, for 7 days or for 10 days or for 12 days, depending on where you went, they come away saying, we never felt our most alive than we did when we were on a natural habitat trip. And so that is my short and sweet version of who we are as a company. And I would open it up to questions before I turn it over to Allie.
Sure thing. Anyone have a question for Dawn? Laura, you typed something in? Oh, Lord.
Oh, it's just that the places that Sheila had listed that you guys went to, I've been to, and the ones even that you talked about, I've been to. I love them all.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You have been to all places: New Zealand, Rwanda, Bhutan, Botswana. We absolutely do all of those excursions. So thank you for that so much, Laura.
Anyone have any questions before we keep going here? Okay, Allie, I'll turn it over to you. I still have it on multiple shares, so you should be able to share your screen if you have a PowerPoint.
I don't have a PowerPoint. I was hoping it could be a little bit more of an open conversation if everybody's okay with that. And I can share my screen if there's anything in particular that someone would like to have a look at. But I can always send follow-up PDF information on a specific trip or idea through Sheila. Dawn touched briefly on one of my very favorite trips. If you can see over my shoulder here, some of the largest bears in the world are on the Katmai coast. This was one of my favorite photos, and I am not a photographer. So just to kind of show you some of the beautiful scenery you can see. This is a little bit of a cliche, but I really do feel like, you know, as Thoreau said, oh, sorry, let me make sure this is, as Thoreau sort of mentioned, in wilderness, we find the preservation of the world. And I do really feel like there's something really soul satisfying about being in wild places in a way that you feel like you are positively impacting and not taking away from the beauty and the preservation of that region. And that is, you know, to Dawn's point, kind of our mission in the world is to raise awareness through education, through experience, to kind of light the fire of you caring about these places, you telling the story of these places, and us continuing to financially invest in the people and the wildernesses that call to us, that speak to us. You know, as nature lovers, I'm sure you kind of feel that same way when you've gone out, whether it's a walk to see the fall leaves in the time of COVID, or a wild trip to a faraway destination like Antarctica or Botswana, as we've mentioned. We really kind of bounce on just a few things that Dawn mentioned, a couple of standout differences between natural habitat and some of our competitors, or those comparatively in our sort of niche of adventure travel. We specialize solely and exclusively on nature and wildlife. We don't try to be all things for all people, and I do really think that that has led to a lot of our success in doing what we do very, very well. Apart from the small groups, which Dawn mentioned as a keystone of who we are and what we do, I think that our emphasis on the high quality of our naturalist leaders is second to none. You know, we are close partners, actually sister companies with Lindblad Expeditions, if any of you have traveled with them through Sheila's wonderful advice. If you've heard the spiels through Lisa and other friends in the industry, you know how committed they are to vetting and hiring and employing the best and the brightest. And we very much follow suit on that front. Another unique aspect, especially in a time of COVID, is our commitment to not cancel departures. Obviously, that's shifted a little bit here in the last couple months, but historically, over the 35 plus years that we've been running trips, once you have committed to joining a trip with us, we commit to you that we will run the trip. There's no such thing as low enrollment numbers. You know, obviously there's a little bit of negotiating right now because it's a landscape none of us have navigated before, but I'm pretty confident in telling you that if you do book a trip with us that we are confident it's going to go, you can start healing from all the disappointments you've probably felt in the last 6 months of having your travel plans delayed. And then the other note Don touched on, that we're the World Wildlife Fund Conservation Partner and how that's a real two-way mirror. Not only does it provide our guides an avenue to a lot of field information, but we invite our guests to be a part of that active experience as well, becoming World Wildlife Fund members if they'd like to and they travel with us, and being a part of that real sort of citizen science, you know, making a difference through the things that you're seeing, whether it's a whale that you spotted and got a picture of that then your guide's going to help send in to the World Wildlife team for tracking, or you know, you spotted something unusual, or you can do a bird count on a trip. And the more people we have out there, the more we have a finger on the pulse of what's happening around the globe. So it's a pretty neat experience. I'll gloss over some of the other things. The one other thing I just wanted to highlight again was that, you know, Don touched on this, that our version of luxury looks a little different. He mentioned the thread count and the wildlife count. You know, if your version of luxury is the idea of staying in a mobile lodge out on the tundra so that day or night you can look out your window and see a polar bear nosing his way up to sniff around a little bit, then we'd be the company for you. Or if, you know, your idea of luxury is getting remote access to a place where maybe there's no crystal chandeliers or silver service, but you can smell the wild through the canvas walls of your tent, then that is in line with exactly what makes our hearts beat a little faster.
Hey, Ellie, the picture you have behind you, is that the trip my clients are booked on with you that we've had to reschedule to next year?
That's the Grizzlies trip, and it is phenomenal adventure. It's kind of Alaska done a little differently. We charter our own 8-person crabbing vessel that's been converted for passenger travel. So it's not luxurious by a lot of terms, but the fact that we are one of the only small groups out on this entire wild coast of Alaska, where again, you have the largest bears in the world roaming free, where you have the chance of spotting wolves, marine life, and where from dawn to dusk, you could be out there, you know, sitting quietly and peacefully watching a mother nurse her cubs because she's that comfortable with your presence, and not see a single other soul aside from the group you came with. There's very few experiences like that in the world. You know, like Don mentioned, sort of Botswana has my heart in terms of wild places, but Antarctica and this Katmai Coast and a very small handful of others, I think really are truly wild. And that's a trip that I, and anyone who's ever been on it, will come home raving about. We're doing that in a heartbeat. And it's just an awesome experience for you if you feel like it's the right.
And you guys are just starting to do something too. And I don't want to cut off anything you're going to say in a little bit, but you guys are just starting to do some women-only trips.
We are indeed. And to kind of piggyback on Don's make it private idea, what we've always historically done very, very well is small group adventures. And one of the reasons that appeals to so many guests that look, that we all look a little bit like, our typical travelers, is that I think people really want to get out there and really want to experience these things and these places, but they don't want to do it alone. They want to do it with a group of other like-minded guests who share that passion for conservation and that passion for natural history. and do it in a way where it's not your cookie cutter bus tour. It's not your cruise ship experience. It is really tailored. And there's a small group that makes that really reachable for more people. Another way we're reaching some people who might not feel comfortable even with that model is offering some women's only departures. And that came directly from our clients saying, hey, we had a group up to see our polar bears in Churchill, which I'll chat about in a second, that had such an awesome time. It just happened to be all women. We had a women guiding team on that trip by chance. And it was, I think it was like 13 or 14 women from all walks of life and all parts of the world. They loved it so much that they came back and they all signed up for a Northern Lights trip to go back in the winter. And they asked if we could do like a women's series. You know, could we get some speakers in to talk about the women's experience and promote our town? And how about some women who are entrepreneurs and trying to make a difference in the world? You know, are there any Arctic scientists in chat from the Northern Lights Study Center who can talk from their point of view? So sort of wove this trip together, and it really just took off from there. And we're dabbling, so you won't see a ton of those trips listed. But if ever you have a small group, whether it's 4 or 8 or 12 of you, and you say, you know what, yep, I think a girlfriend's trip is in order, and we'd be happy if some other ladies joined us. If you're comfortable with that, we'd be happy to entertain the idea of either making it private and calling it a women's only departure, or just showing the list of ones that are already sort of marked that way. And as we see interest grow there, we will grow the list of trips where that's possible.
Because you have a large number of female-only travelers, female solo travelers already, right? Like
we do, yeah. I think the large majority of guests who travel solo are women with natural habitat. I don't know
because we're adventurous.
I don't know if we're braver ladies.
Exactly.
No offense, Dawn, and I don't know who else is out there listening, but
No, it's absolutely true.
you know, and it's not just that they're single women. Often their partners have a different idea of their perfect vacation, and that's perfectly fine. Like we said, we're not everything for everybody, and being married myself for almost 10 years now, I can say that, you know, happy marriage sometimes is when we get to go our separate ways for a little while and explore. So yeah, that's another idea to throw out there. Speaking to this particular COVID world that we now find ourselves living in and hoping to eventually travel in again, a few things that we are doing. John mentioned we feel particularly well positioned to weather this current storm. Financially, we are feeling like we're in a quite stable position. First and foremost, because we've been a very responsible company with our money for a very long time and had a sizable rainy day fund, if you will. Lots of money that we had set aside to perhaps buy our own or build our own boat in the Galapagos, or money that we've invested in things like building our base camp in Greenland, kind of looking for the next big idea. But thankfully that has sustained us through this year. We are actually sister companies with Lindblad Expeditions, and they are a publicly traded company. So their finances are also very transparent, and they've secured an $85 million loan such that if they weren't even to run another trip on their small expeditions through the end of 2021, they'll still be around too. So
I was mentioning to Allie, I've done a couple of calls with Lisa Bain from Lindblad, and many of you ladies have been on those calls. A couple of you have traveled with Lindblad already. So it's all about like-minded people, right? That's why Lindblad and Natural Habitat came together, I'm sure.
yeah, we're very like-minded in that sense. Well, first and foremost with regards to the conservation ethic. But above and beyond that, you know, our CEOs see eye to eye on a lot of things. And one of those things is that we are not a blip. We want to be leaders in our industry, and we are here for the long term. We've all been here. You know, Lindblad obviously leading the charge. Sorry. Lindblad obviously leading the charge in terms of expeditions worldwide for a very long time. But again, we are 35 years and going strong, and have lots of ideas on how we will sustain for the long term. One of the things that we've been doing that I think we're committed to, it makes my job a lot easier because I can't day in and day out, is that we're one of very few minority of travel companies, Natural Habitat, who have said flat out from March till today, and we'll most likely continue this, that if we cancel your trip, we will give you a full refund, including, you know, little extras and things that you've purchased through us, whether it's hotels or what have you. You know, most companies are mandating, you know, travel credits and things like that. And I get it, but we've never been a company that's spent money on deposits. It's a separate pool of money that we use for our overhead and running our trips. And so we can flat out say, yep, you know what? I'm so sorry you're disappointed. And if it's the right thing for you to bump your trip, wonderful. 80% of our travelers who've been impacted have done just that. And I'm sure that a few of you have done too with Sheila. But should the right idea be a refund, we're happy to have you. And I'll tell you what, since March, we've seen a lot of those guests who we originally refunded coming right back to book again now, because we showed that we were, you know, that the merit of our company is really standing by our guests and our colleagues in the travel profession, doing the right thing by people. And I think that's going to come back in spades. I'm very confident that. We've been running trips. So we are US based, and we started running trips here into Yellowstone National Park. They have gone really successfully this summer. A couple of the things that we've done and are committed to continuing to do forward as we look to open our international portfolio with Baja trips here very shortly into Mexico in, you know, February or so for whale season, with trips down to see the monarch butterflies, which if you've never considered, I highly recommend. It's an astonishing trip and the closest I've come to the feeling of pure magic in a long, long time, just to be able to literally hear the sounds of a million butterfly wings flapping through a forest. It sounds like those first raindrops when it starts to rain and you're walking through it's, I get goosebumps thinking about it. But anyway, monarch butterfly trips are a go for this early 2021 season as well. As soon as the US-Canada border opens as well, looking to run a few more destinations responsibly and in partnership with our local partners when they are ready to host us. But we've started to make our groups, our small groups, even smaller. So in Yellowstone, by example, where Dawn mentioned we might put 7 in a vehicle, we're committed to 5 right now. And that is a 13-passenger Sprinter van with only 5 people in it. So the odds of having, you know, more space to yourself and, you know, really are prioritizing making sure that we are enhancing cleanliness and sanitation, requiring masks for the time being where social distancing can't be accomplished, flexibility with meal times, whether it's, you know, private tables for each group of guests that's come together, tables away from other guests, outdoor dining in a creative way, any way we can manage it, you know, allowing room service in a situation where we might not have a better option. There's lots of things that we've become very nimble to incorporate on a trip to be as COVID conscious as we can and to mitigate the risk to a level that we feel is an appropriate amount to say, yes, we can run these trips as long as our guests also are active participants in embracing safely running our journeys and joining us. Those are just a handful of the things. Another couple of things would be, you know, being much more flexible with singles, anyone who's signed up to join us as a willing to share guest. We're doing our best not to match people in the interim, at least through Q1 trips, all the way through March. We might extend that as well. So in essence, a free single supplement, although we can't guarantee it. And then I think those were a few things that you'd asked me to just touch on, right, Sheila?
Yeah.
Were there any other little nitty gritty details you wanted me to get into there?
I think those solo things are, that's really cool. The ladies, most of the people on the call today so far are solo travelers. So, you know, while not guaranteed, the very strong possibility of having the solo supplement waived is obviously incredible.
Yeah, on any trip we've run, We started running trips again in June, and any trips we've run from June till now, we have not matched anyone who said that they were willing to match, just because we feel like at the moment, right, to do is just have on an extra hotel room. That it's kind of the least we can do, because you guys, anyone traveling with us now, sort of, is taking the chance of traveling with us and putting their faith in us, and we're returning that in full. Now on to the more exciting thing.
Well, wait, Allie, let me just add to this, that just so you know that we have one of the most affordable single supplements in the industry. So even if there is a single supplement that is assessed, it's on average like 10 to 15%. So a lot of companies will like hit you with a double or 50%. So even if you were, and we're doing our due diligence to waive that, even if you were assessed with a single supplement, it's among the least amount in the industry.
Which is just great. I mean, you've already mentioned too, Don and Allie, that the groups are pretty small to begin with. We're not talking like the huge coach tours that do 40 and 50 people. We're talking a very small, intimate group to start with.
Yeah, 12 on average has been the history, but it's actually dropped from that during COVID. So where it would have been 14 people, it's now 10, and so on and so forth. So.
Yeah, so if anybody has questions, you're welcome to jump in, or I can talk about what we all love to talk about most, which is the most exciting places we all either have been or want to go. Sheila mentioned a couple that she wanted me to touch on in the topic list there. And, as you mentioned, Laura, some of you guys have had the great privilege to visit these places as well. I've been to most of them, but not all. And so I've got a few on my bucket list as well. One of the topics we've already chatted on briefly is Churchill. I don't know how many of you have been. Anybody want to raise their hands if they've been? Not yet? All right.
Laura,
well, Churchill,
Laura, you haven't been. Laura's been just about everywhere. If you haven't been in Canada.
Except in Canada.
Churchill's in our backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
Churchill, for those of you who aren't immediately familiar, Churchill's got this remote Arctic outpost right on the shores of the Hudson Bay, where the Churchill River meets the bay. And it is pretty well renowned year-round for its natural history highlights. In the winter, you have these sort of harsh, stark, beautiful landscapes. But the real highlight, January to March, would be the Aurora Borealis. Churchill sits right below the Van Allen belt, which is where most of that sort of cosmic activity happens. And so it's a perfect position. And because the bay freezes solid, you don't have a lot of weather interference like you might find in the European Arctic, closer to bodies of water that don't freeze, where you can have cloud fronts move in and things like that. Churchill's just a more reliable destination for doing the Northern Lights. And up there in the winter, we have some sort of proprietary viewing spots, like a unique cabin out in the tundra, out in the boreal forest, where you can step out and around the fire, see the lights in the evening, step back in to warm up and have a hot chocolate. Or whether it's our Aurora pods, which are basically like almost like a railroad car, but the top half is all sort of glass and closed viewing platform. We also have domes you can view from, and some other unique spots, including out on our tundra vehicles on the tundra. Churchill is arguably best known for the polar bear trips in the fall, which would be October, November. We did have to cancel our season this year, but we are very hopeful that we'll have a wonderful season again next year. We've been running that trip. It's kind of a keystone of ours for a very long time. And again, there the focus really, there's a couple of companies that do that, not a lot. But I do biasly think that we're the best at what we do. And I think our guides are top notch there. We've been very small groups venturing out onto the tundra into a conservation area on a vehicle that's essentially like an enormous school bus on monster truck tires. Those vehicles can accommodate 30 or 35 guests, and we never put more than 15 or 16 on. So everybody's got plenty of space to move around, to hear the guide, to really kind of delve into that day out in the time out with the polar bears. We've talked briefly about Alaska and some of my favorite trips there. This trip that we've talked about a few times is a shorter journey. It's closer to about a week in length. But we also have a longer itinerary that's closer to 2 weeks that would be a little more well-rounded, including some of the highlights like Denali National Park and the Kenai Fjords and some other things where, you know, many guests that I've spoken to in the last few months are pivoting from perhaps considering Alaska by boat to considering Alaska by land in a post-COVID era. And we have some wonderful small group journeys if that rings a bell for you. Those are a little bit more of our domestic trips. And as Don mentioned, you know, we're getting into some other areas and broadening our North American portfolio with a trip up to Quebec to see the fall leaves. Many of you are probably familiar, but if anyone's wanted ever to do that with a naturalist and not to have to bother driving yourself, just to kind of sit back and relax, that's something we'll have running next year.
Allie, we had a question about how safe are the polar bear trips?
Incredibly safe, and also in terms of the physical requirements, quite easy. So while we're in town is like a one-lane road with no stop signs, no stop lights, a couple of hotels and a couple of souvenir shops. We only walk around it during the day. We never walk around at night. There's a patrol, like a polar bear patrol, and there are humane polar bear traps they set around the perimeter of town. You will hear a polar bear alarm if there is a bear in town at a time of day where they don't anticipate one. At night, our guides will always drive guests around in the small vehicles, like the little vans, or they'll walk them personally from one place to the next. But for the most part, you're in these vehicles. We're never out in polar bear habitat on foot. These vehicles, because they're raised quite high, the polar bears can't get into them and we don't get out. That's for the bear safety and ours as well. And then in terms of physicality, as long as you can navigate a handful of stairs on your own, really the trip is within reach for most everyone. We have accommodated guests with more challenging physical ailments or handicaps, and we're happy to open that conversation if there's something in particular you'd like to ask us about accommodating you on that journey. So,
and just to add to what Allie was saying about the physicality and the safety, the word adventures in natural habitat adventures sometimes leads people to believe that we are an adventure company and that we're like rough and tumble. That is not the case at all. When I meet Sheila and advisors and clients, I often say that if you can walk the length of a football field unassisted, you can do the majority of our trips. Clearly, mountain gorillas and going up to Cusco and the Sacred Valley and getting in and out of a Zodiac in Greenland, which does have its own special limitations. The majority of our trips are soft. We are a soft adventure company, and nothing is more soft than a polar bear excursion in Churchill. And just so you know, we have the boots and the parkas and the hats, and you don't need to. Canadians all have that, but couples from Florida and Texas and Arizona that want to come up to journey with us and see polar bears are totally capable of doing it with a layer of long johns and jeans and gloves and a little fleece jacket, and then we gear them up with everything else they need. And that's the case with all of the extreme adventures that we do. We always take care of our guests, and they don't need to buy that kind of equipment. We provide it for them.
And just to jump in, Don, most of these ladies already know this, but when he says soft adventure, to differentiate that from hard adventure, when we say hard adventure, it generally means you need special equipment, you need training,
Exactly. Yeah.
Riding.
And you need to go out and hike for hours before you go on it. This is not what we do. It's like you come as you are and you join the trip, providing that you understand the difference between a difficult and a soft adventure. And the majority of our trips are designed. I mean, listen, our demographic is 61 years old, female, affluent, curious about nature, love the planet, and want to just get involved, but not need to take a course in aerobics or whatever to be ready to go.
And to that point, I like to use the term that we travel at an interpretive pace. For one, we're never in a hurry to get anywhere. It's not a race. And for two, when we're traveling at a pace where we can really stop and, for lack of a better term, smell the roses, but we don't want to just smell them, we actually want to learn about them. You know, what is that? You know, there needs to be time for curiosity. And I find that this type of travel lends itself well to that. Most of our guests aren't in a hurry to get anywhere, and most people enjoy taking that time to learn about things as you go. Whether you're curious about the bird that just flew by, or you're curious about that plant and why it grows there and not 25 feet down the trail, well, then that's what your naturalist is going to stop and chat with you about. So,
We've just had a question about where you sleep. I think it's on the Churchill polar bear tours. You don't sleep out with the bears.
well, you have options. The majority of our trips are what we call town-based, which means you're in a proper hotel room with ensuite bathroom. They are basic accommodations. I would put it more along the lines of like a motel standard, but they're clean, they're warm, they're comfortable, and they are the very best of what this small town of Churchill has to offer. The alternative is to stay out on our mobile Tundra Lodge, which is in the conservation area. Those are our lodge-based trips. And there you have a setup. It's a little bit like a European train where everyone has their own individual room. The bathrooms are shared. It's not like college where everyone has to share the same bathroom. You know, the door closes and then it's just you, but there are only so many for the guests on board to share. It works out very well the way that we do it logistically, but it is a slight bit more rustic in that nature. So yes, you can wake up with polar bears out the window, or you could opt for something where it's a little more comfortable in terms of having your own private bathroom and hotel type accommodations you're perhaps more used to.
You also do pods too, right? Like for the Northern Light trips?
We visit the pods, we never sleep in them.
Okay, okay.
Except we have a brand new trip by luxury train from Russia to Finland to see the Northern Lights that'll be running in 2022. I can send you information about that. We just announced it last week and put it out in about 24 hours for the first two destinations for departures. In the next 2 weeks, we hope to have 2 more, fingers crossed. And we'll have quite a number of singles available. So that's a unique option if you wanted to explore that part of the world, but again, Russia feels inaccessible by yourself. There, we will have the chance to sleep in a nice hotel for a night. Should you choose to, no pressure. But yeah, we're not sleeping in the pods.
Okay.
And I don't want to bore you guys. I want to make sure there's time for everyone.
I'm gonna actually share a screen if I can, hopefully. Yep. So
I can see you working.
Well, while Dawn's doing that, I'll just mention that Allie and I were chatting when COVID started shutting the world down. We were talking about maybe getting a women's only trip with Canadians to go to Churchill to see the polar bears. There were all kinds of complications why it didn't come to bear, literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
But we'll have to get back to that idea maybe, because I know I have a lot of solo ladies that love to travel and love adventure, and I've taken some big groups on the Rocky Mountaineer or on a river cruise to Europe. So, you know, a little bit more adventure with natural habitat's always a good idea.
Great. And then well done. Don, are you still putting that up there?
Can you see my screen right now?
We're seeing
define
your
custom show window.
You're seeing what?
It says define custom show, and we got a slides in presentation, a list. So maybe.
All right, I don't know what's going on here, so
there you go.
Try this.
X that out and maybe start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, what Don is trying to show you there, that's our Tundra Lodge.
And go here to, all right, so can you see this now?
Yes.
This is the Tundra Lodge that Allie was showing. So you actually have a bunch of double wides that are hauled out onto the tundra, and despite the fact that they're on wheels, it doesn't move. It's actually there from the beginning of October to the end of November. And on the front left, you have a dining car, and then you have a car that is actually a living area with a spotting scope and a little fireplace. And then here you have your little single berths. This is what it looks like. It's a single bed, and you have a little closet. And the downside is you don't have ensuite facilities, but you do have five bathroom shower areas, and half the people are on the lodge while the other half are going out on this, what Allie was talking about earlier, our Polar Rover, which is a state-of-the-art monster truck on wheels that everybody gets a window seat, and you have this back viewing area. The windows in front are canted forward. And this is our competitor. This is actually something that you would use if you weren't with Natural Habitat. Very, very different, crowded, everybody packed in. And here we are with an opportunity to go out and have a face-to-face encounter with the King of the Arctic. So it's a very different situation. And nothing is better than, coming face-to-face with the King of the Arctic, but literally nose-to-nose with the King of the Arctic.
Or
So,
nose to boots in my case.
Nose to boot, nose to boot.
A little safer going back to that question.
Yeah. And so this viewing area right here was retrofitted about 10 years ago, where we removed the sheet metal and we put in graded metal. So this is where Allie had the nose to boot experience, because we literally retrofitted the ground or the bottom of that viewing area with sheet metal or graded metal. So this is where Allie had a polar bear come up and lick her boots. I'm not kidding you. Yeah.
It was one of those moments.
Yeah. So I had to add that while we were doing it. So.
And I was going to say, moving on to, so we've touched kind of a lot on North America here, but we do, as Don mentioned, the world, whether it's a wild 8-person sailing trip to Antarctica, that is super out there and adventurous on the high end of adventure, and some more physical trips like trekking to see the Rwanda mountain gorillas or the gorillas in Uganda. Laura, I see you've got a friend there on your shoulder. There you go. And as you can attest, that also is one of those moments where, if you're lucky enough, you stand still and you've got 2 mountain gorilla babies that pell-mell chase each other over your bootstraps. It's like nothing else too. I mean, the whole world is full of these moments, and if you have the chance to get out there, whether it's Bhutan in Nepal or Botswana, as we mentioned, if you haven't been to Africa or have only yet ventured through South Africa or Eastern Africa, I'd highly recommend giving it a try. It's a fascinating destination with the world's largest inland water delta that just draws wildlife from surrounding countries to this lush green, sort of oasis, if you will. Tens of thousands of elephants and leopards almost literally dripping out of trees. And just moreover, apart from the big game and the checklist, it's, that quiet moment of sitting on the veranda with a cup of tea in hand and watching the world go by and seeing what passes, the front of your deck. And it's just maybe nothing. And maybe it's just listening to the sounds rather than even seeing the sights. But those are the visceral moments that have stayed with me through all these adventures. And, as sort of Sheila brought to mind, we have some new itineraries in Australia, in New Zealand. More of our trips we're working to line up. So maybe 2 or 3 trips that you could perhaps do in a row if the idea of maybe doing one long flight is a little daunting, but once you're there, you'd like to stay for a little bit longer. That's another possibility. We're trying to line up more dates. So for example, if you want to do Australia for a few weeks and then New Zealand, or perhaps skip over to Borneo, or perhaps Sri Lanka and India when that feels like a safe idea again. As Sheila can probably attest, we're starting to see many of our guests have shifted their plans to 2021. Many are having calendars that are starting to fill for 2022. We've done our best to finalize our dates and rates pretty far in advance this year. So we're definitely open to booking that far out now. And at the moment, for any trips that are booked before the end of the year, deposits are fully refundable until the final balance due date, which is a pretty low risk way of saving a spot, sort of dipping your toe in, even if right now you're not sure how you're going to feel in 6, 8, 10 months. So if that is something that would interest you to know more about, I've sent Sheila the details on some of those more flexible policies. And we're people just like you. So we're open to having those conversations. If you're like, this, but this, I want to know about this before I commit to this, or here are my concerns, can you speak to those? Or here are my dreams, how can you make them happen? That's what we love doing. So we're here for you guys.
Ellie, I guess Rwanda isn't a trip that people tend to book first. Where do you tend to have most of your folks go to Africa first? Botswana would come up higher, I guess.
Yeah, I think personally, I think if it's, let's say you've only got one trip left, right? One trip in your lifetime, your theme for the day or the weeks. For me, it's going to be Botswana as my top recommendation in Africa. And the reason is that it is so diverse, not only with regards to wildlife, but with regards to landscapes, with regards to activities and the way that you get to experience that place. You have this dry land, you have these dry land savannas where you get some of the dry land species like your giraffe and your zebra and your antelope.
Ellie, can I interrupt for a minute?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I have to do this because, my stories and Allie's stories and my pictures and Allie's pictures can do a lot, but this fits right into what Allie is saying right now. So enjoy.
Is this going to be embarrassing?
Very embarrassing.
Oh.
Oh, look at that. Is that Allie's video or?
Yes, this was a trip I planned for my husband and I.
Oh, awesome.
He has more video talent than I do.
Wow. That's very cool. How long ago did you go?
This would have been just a few years back. That's us.
There's my Allie. There's my girl.
Well, to kind of speak over the scene here a little bit, because the music isn't amazing, but this was actually a wet season trip that we did. So Botswana, you can visit in the green season or you can visit in the dry season. Traditionally, people, I think for a first time, I'd go dry season, which would be June to October. But it is, as I mentioned, sort of these savanna experiences with elephant and zebra and leopard and what have you. But you also have this incredible delta, which draws species that are better adapted to live in these wetlands, like specific types of lechwe, and that's an antelope that has hindquarters built to jump right over these impressive channels. Lion that sort of hunker down on these watery islands between seasons, or then have the free reign once those floodwaters recede. It's just a vast wealth of wildlife, but also you can explore by these private vehicles, but you can also get in a boat and you can go out, and it's a whole different experience to be more at eye level. If you're in a very quiet boat and an elephant comes down to the water to drink, you're suddenly at trunk level instead of looking from the vehicle. So it's pretty fascinating. And I just love that you get to fly on these small aircraft between places. To me, it's more than a mode of transportation. It's really flight seeing. as this landscape unfolds below you. And you can see the game trails as you could kind of see flying into the runway. You know, in this particular one, we had just cleared the runway of giraffes so that that plane could land to pick us up. So, you know, there's those moments in time where you're just out there, and Botswana does it well, as opposed to other parts of Africa where they have a national park system. Like you've probably heard of Kruger National Park and the Serengeti and the Masai Mara National Park or Reserve. In Botswana, they operate on a concession system, so that it's huge, vast tracts of land that are on a long-term lease to these private small safari camps. And they have maximum numbers of guests per enormous chunk of land. It does not operate like a national park. Nobody can come in and go out unless they are a part of that private lodge experience. And so this is one of those boat journeys, just to give you the sense of how the landscape changes. Sorry, jumping in. But it's just so neat because, you know, a busy day, a really crazy hectic day would be like a fantastic sighting where the guide radios to 2 other guides from camp, the same camp you're staying at, and says, you know what, this is too good to miss. Like this, for example, was a cheetah in a place where cheetah are very rare. And so we found it and we called that sighting in, and we had that sighting to ourselves for half an hour before another vehicle showed up. And then they very patiently waited at a very appropriate distance until we were ready to move on. There's no jockeying for this perfect light or space. You know, this was one of 8 leopards that the vehicles from our camp saw that night.
Wow.
And it just was one of those moments where it's like, it doesn't, you feel like you're the only one there. And you really feel how low impact, really responsible conservation travel can be in Botswana. That's why it means so much to me personally. There are lots of other really great places, and if you've seen out of Africa and your heart is set on the Serengeti, I can wax poetic there too. But
well, I think that video really shows the difference with natural habitat, right? Like the access you get and the small groups, and
Yeah.
you kind of skip over it very quickly about conservation, but sustainability and conservation is something that's really key to who you guys are. And I don't know, did you mention it, Don? You guys have won Virtuoso's sustainability partner. You guys really walk the talk. It's not just
we do. We raise the bar, and it's not about winning an award. It's not about like being the best in sustainability. It's about raising the bar and bringing other companies like Lindblad and Big 5 Tours. And we are not competing as the best of the best. We're competing with other companies as, hey, we've done this, why don't you do it as well? And then it helps us raise the bar. And when you have a little company like Natural Habitat Adventure go carbon neutral, which we did 12 years ago, and then you have airlines and hotels and big companies do that's what's meaningful. And that's what we're all about, is like we're influenced, as when I went back to my first slide, boldly influencing the entire travel industry, is give back to communities and share our ethos on sustainability. That's what we're all about. It's not bragging rights. It's not, we did this and we're the only one doing this. It's about, we just happened to get here first, and let's see who gets there next.
Yeah.
And if the next company that gets there is Virgin Airways or, you know, a big cruise ship, that's fantastic, because they carry it further than we ever would. And Allie and I have been very ingrained in our sustainability efforts from the get-go, going back a decade ago. And it's wonderful for both of us to see what that has spawned in terms of encouraging other companies to do what we've been doing.
And you don't do it, you're being very modest. You don't do it for the awards, but you get the awards because you stand out in what you do, and you believe it and you live it, and your whole company is built around that. And one
exactly.
Of the lines, one of the lines you said early on, Dom, when the whole industry shut down, right? And we're talking about how to regenerate, because a lot of these very small places are so reliant on tourism dollars, and they've been devastated besides the travel industry itself. You know, until tourism recovers, there ain't going to be any economic recovery worldwide, because 1 in 10 jobs are tourism and travel. But these small little places are so reliant on the money and doing it properly. And you had a line done, build back a better normal, build back better. Well, I'm
Yeah.
quoting Joe Biden there. No, it wasn't the Joe Biden line, but it was like a new normal, better normal.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, the better normal, right? It's not the new normal. And actually, one of Allie's and my colleague created a wonderful metaphor as we emerge from COVID. And it's so appropriate because it does have to do with the polar bears. And that is that we're not coming out of a tunnel, and we're not coming out of a darkness. And we, not natural habitat, but a travel industry in general, and as a community of the world, we are a polar bear. You know, look at the polar bears behind your back, Sheila, and look at the polar bear in my background. Is that we've been in hibernation, and hibernation is good. Hibernation has been, we've been in a cave, and we've been restoring our resources, and we've been basically patiently waiting to emerge. And when we do emerge, it's not coming out of a dark tunnel. We're going to come out of a bear den with strong resources and ready to greet the world in a new way, in a way that is sustainable, and in a way that is the world that we emerge from this den is going to be a better world, and a world that is like receptive to sustainability. And we're ready to pounce and pounce in a way that is good, pounce in a way that is like, it's our time to pounce as a polar bear that is looking for a world that is more receptive to what we are needing, and climate change and all that kind of stuff. So I really do liken, I don't like the new normal, and I don't like coming out of the tunnel, and I don't come out of post-COVID as metaphors. I like the metaphor of a polar bear coming out of a bear den and saying, we're ready to go. And
Awesome.
honestly, natural habitat and vision travel and all of the people that we collectively represent are ready to do that.
It's not about just take photographs and leave only footprints. It's more than leaving footprints now. You gotta make it better for going there too.
For sure.
Guys, we've gone over, but I wanted to, if everyone has another 5 minutes or so, or Ellie and Don, you're good. I'd like to see if anyone has any questions about any of the things we talked about. We talked about both Botswana and Churchill in detail, kind of skimmed over Rwanda a little bit, but obviously that's really important. Didn't really mention Bhutan, except it's one of your great trips as well, and touched on Australia, New Zealand, and Northern Lights. But I'd like to open it up if everyone's good for another 5 minutes. Does anyone have any questions? Helen.
I didn't have a question really. I just had a comment. I just wanted to say that I've never traveled with you yet, but since COVID, I've been regularly watching the Daily Dose of Nature
Oh,
shows.
awesome.
And I've really enjoyed them, and I've told other people about them, and they've been great. I've learned so much. They're just wonderful. So I really thank you for those.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of fantastic feedback. For anybody who doesn't know, when COVID hit, our marketing department quickly hit the brakes on marketing for the moment and turned their energies towards how can we still engage our guests in our mission from afar. And we came up with this daily dose of webinar idea, a daily dose of nature webinar idea, where weekly we're posting webinars. It's a lot of guest speakers and our naturalists speaking. Helen and others, we always welcome input. So if there's something that you'd like to learn about or like to see that you haven't already, I'll let Sheila know, and we'll put it in the pot for future consideration.
Yeah, and Helen, we'll share that link with you so that you can if you haven't already, disperse it among all of your clientele, because it's amazing. And it's the nice thing is it's educational. It's not promoting natural habitat per se. It's actually just unveiling a destination as what is out there, in a very low key way of saying, this is what's available in Uganda, this is what's available in Patagonia, this is what's available in Churchill. So, and Helen, I feel like you sense that as well.
Yeah.
And for those that haven't seen it, I'll when I send the follow-up email, I'll put a link into the Daily Dose so you can see what it's like. Ali, we've had a question about Bhutan. Can you speak a little bit more about your trips there?
Yeah, I can. I don't know if Don, you can pull that up, but essentially the trip that we offer there is about a 2-week trip, a little short, about 12 days, where we start in Kathmandu. And the highlights would be Chitwan National Park for the rhino viewing in particular. Chances of seeing tiger as well. We're traveling into some of the World Heritage sites like Kathmandu along the way. And then into Bhutan. So sort of the Nepal piece of the itinerary is a little more wildlife focused, a little more into the natural history side. And then on Bhutan, obviously, it's a little bit more just about nature, but also about, you know, the humanness of the natural history side of things there, where, you know, obviously many of the landscapes are stunning with the mountain scenes and, you know, things, but no trip into Bhutan would be complete without also getting a chance to see some of the most beautiful temples and buildings and monasteries, and a chance to really get to know these people who, you know, until relatively recently speaking, have been, you know, more isolated from the Western world. My colleagues who took this trip a few years back had a game one afternoon where they sat in the sort of town square in Paro and tried to see how long it would take one of them to find one Western article of clothing on any well, I think they included tourists, and it took them about 2 hours until finally they spotted, poking out from the robe of one of the little young monks, a pair of Crocs.
Wow.
But it's just one of those places, you know, I'm sure you've all heard of sort of how they characterize themselves by their gross national happiness. But as Don is pointing out here, some of the incredible mountain scenery, this is the famed tiger's nest that you can see perched atop the hilltop there. Not a required climb by any means, but available for those who wish to take the journey. But the chance to see some of these lesser known sites in Nepal. India kind of gets a little bit of all the Himalayan fame and glory when it comes to wildlife, but there's some really incredible places to explore, and Chitwan is sort of the gem of the wildlife world outside. And then transportationally, flying into these areas, we get to see some of the Himalayas, and we usually position our guests so that they're seated on the right side to see, you know, Everest and some of the other incredible mountains in the region as we fly. So it's a pretty stunning journey to a part of Asia that, again, most people haven't yet explored. Nepal, I think, is quite an afterthought for a lot of people when it comes to wildlife, but shouldn't be. Again, as I mentioned, you know, rhino being quite prolific, and Asiatic one-horned rhino are so much, in my opinion, so much more prehistoric looking than even the African rhino. If you've seen them in person, they look like armored tanks, almost literally. It's absolutely incredible. And then, of course, as I mentioned, tiger is a possibility. We don't always spot them, but you can. Sloth bear we've spotted in the region, and leopard and all sorts of different fascinating bird species that are endemic to the region. And getting a chance there to really usually we get in to see some of the World Wildlife Fund projects in action. Which is pretty fascinating.
And one thing about, you know, natural habitat tours are generally based on nature interpretation and it's all about the wildlife and the animals. However, we do have, particularly in Asia, whether it's China or Sri Lanka or India or Bhutan and Nepal, it's a perfect blend of culture and nature more than anything else. You know, you really are. We always try to incorporate local indigenous people into our tours, but depending on where we are, it's the draw is more about the nature and the wildlife. However, in Asia, wherever we go, Borneo and um, Sri Lanka and India and Bhutan and Nepal, the aspect of cultural interaction is going to be upped a little bit. So for folks that want to, you know, are into ethnic foods and a diversity or an immersion into the local people, those are the trips where we really blend nature and culture the best. Would you agree, Ali? But again, our job and our focus is on nature, natural history, and nature interpretation. So
Just had someone say Bhutan has the nicest people in the world.
for sure,
It's
yeah.
true.
Actually,
Yeah.
I'm gonna actually say Canada has the nicest people in the world.
Read the room, right?
Thank
Read the
you.
room.
Yeah.
I had a question about Rwanda. Laura's noting so easy to see the mountain gorillas, newly paved roads, only 2 hours from the airport. Very clean African country. Banned plastic bags, so no garbage flying around. And Rwanda's probably the safest and cleanest spot to see the gorillas.
Yeah, and to Laura's point, I think one thing that makes it a natural standout is its accessibility. You know, from Kigali, it's a very quick, relatively speaking for Africa, it's a quick drive, it's an easy drive. There are frequent flights in and out of Kigali from other areas of Africa. It's most often not a standalone destination. The large majority of guests who visit Rwanda will do so in combination with safari to Kenya or Tanzania. It can be combined with any other African country. It's just that you are geographically most convenient to those areas. Uganda, just by comparison, as most people will at some point when they look, compare the two, it is trickier to get to Burundi from Entebbe, the capital city. We usually fly for that very reason.
Yeah.
But that said, when it comes to the actual gorilla trekking itself, I would just caution saying one is always going to be easier than the other, just because you never know what the day will hold with which gorilla group they're assigned to, where they've gone for lunch that day out in the mountains, you know, so it can be easier to physically trek in Rwanda. It isn't always that case. Sometimes Uganda can be on par in terms of the physicality of reaching the actual gorillas.
Yeah,
Apart
Rwanda
from
was
roads and
the shortest distance on beautifully paved brand new roads.
Yeah.
And completely clean, easy to get around. They speak
Yeah.
French, they speak English, and it was so easy to get there.
Yeah.
It was actually getting to where you start to hike for the gorillas, and
Yeah.
to get the passes to get in to see them too.
And then that's the other point I would make is just at the moment, Rwanda most recently has raised their rates for permits. So it's a little bit more costly on the permit side of the thing than Uganda is. But when you factor in the flights to make it a more comfortable journey, then sometimes it evens out. So we can look at either. I love Rwanda as well. So I think Laura's made some very good points for everybody there.
Awesome.
People are thinking of 1990s when there was a war going on, and that was like, that's long time ago. That's 30 years ago. So that's over.
Yes.
Right.
That's not there anymore. You don't have to worry about that.
For Australia, New Zealand, do you do any astronomy-based or trips?
Not specifically. And Don, jump in if you feel like fielding any of these. We have run over the past couple of years a handful of like eclipse specific trips. When one of our already tried and true itineraries has coincided with, then we will focus on that. But we don't want to delve into a whole world that we aren't the experts at.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just add to that whether I've been in Yellowstone or Alaska or Botswana or anywhere, that the caliber of our guides goes well beyond just the animals and the topography and the geology. I'm always amazed at what they bring. I was in Botswana and we stopped at a night game drive and took out a telescope, and Tuto Motalesi, our guide, literally put a telescope up and he pointed out all the constellations. And so I'm not going to say that's going to be the case everywhere, but we have a knack of hiring guides that are multitasked in not just what you're going to see. You know, if you're going to see polar bears, there's probably a guide that is going to talk about, you know, more than just polar bears and the boreal forest and the Arctic tundra. He or she is going to be able to talk incredibly intelligently about I mean, Northern Lights as an example. That's a trip that it doesn't have to do with wildlife. Natural habitat is not about animals, it's about wildlife, and wildlife, remind you, is the rock formations of southern Utah and the amazing aurora borealis. So you just have to expand your mind when you're thinking of our company as just animals and wildlife, and extend it to the heavens and the geology and the sands and the dirt and everything. And our guides do an exquisite job of bringing everything about what you're experiencing when you're there.
That's awesome. Thank you. Any other questions? I had several typed in. Does anyone have anything before we sign off? No? Well,
Don't be
Donna,
shy. Don't be shy.
Well, I would like to thank you guys all for your time and your patience and your interest, and just open
Indeed.
the door for any follow-up questions for Don, myself, or Sheila. You guys have an excellent partner in Sheila, and
thank you.
a wealth of information and experience. So ask her all the questions that you want.
And you know, the great thing about the partnership with you guys, as my clients know, who do we go to sign up for these trips? Just give me a call. I can help you. And the neat thing I was just starting to say is that, you know, if you have specific questions about, you know, Rwanda versus Uganda, for example, it's not a problem for me to get Ali or Don on the phone, and we can do a call with you to get into some specifics. Certainly help you answer any questions as much as possible up front. But if you really want to get into the nitty gritty, I have access to these guys. I have them on speed dial.
Yeah. Hey, Laura just typed in a question real quickly about how many people are on the Polar Bear Lodge. So Laura, we put 29 people on that lodge, but they're broken into, there are 2 expedition leaders that are on the lodge. And so while a group of 14 or 15 is out on the Polar Rover, the other group is there. And that lodge, as you saw, is literally positioned in the middle of the polar bear natural habitat. So you're either out from 8 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock, and then the other group goes out from 1 o'clock to 5 p.m. and then you switch it up every day. So yeah, there are 29 people on the lodge. However, that lodge is broken down into smaller groups of 14 or 15.
Okay, thanks.
You bet.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for giving us much more of your time than I asked you for. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, this is great. We could go on where Ali and I would love to talk, and I can show more inappropriate videos of Ali if you want.
Well, obviously, we had a small but enthusiastic group after Canadian Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. You know, and I love the presentation and the enthusiasm and passion for what you have for your work that you show. So maybe we'll have to get you back another time if you're open.
Any time, Sheila. We're here for you because we love what you do for us, and you are an amazing proponent and a megaphone for natural habitat, and you always have been. So thank you.
And hopefully we see some of these faces out on our trip someday.
Yes, exactly. We'll have to get back to you on that group idea.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
ladies
Okay.
and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.